a statement by the National Task Force to End Domestic Violence.
Without objection, so ordered.
And a letter from 24 members of the House of Representatives urging the committee to use the NTF's trauma-informed approach in questioning Dr. Ford.
Without objection, so ordered.
And a letter from another 116 members of the House asking to delay till all this has been heard.
Without objection, so ordered.
And Dr. Ford has at times been criticized for what she doesn't remember from 36 years ago. But we have numerous experts, including a study by the U.S. Army Military Police School Behavior Sciences Education, that lapses of memory are wholly consistent with severe trauma and stress of assault. I'd ask consent that be entered.
Without objection, so ordered.
And Dr. Ford, I'll just conclude with this. You do remember what happened, do you not?
Very much so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Now, Ms. Mitchell for Senator Graham, and then it's my understanding that that's where you'd like to take a break.
Does that work for you? Does that work for you as well?
We're here to accommodate you, not you accommodate us.
I'm used to being collegial. So.
Okay, go ahead. Ms. Mitchell for Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You told Senator Feinstein in your letter that you and 4 others were present. You've corrected that today to say it was at least 4 others. When you were interviewed by the Washington Post, you said, so then would it be fair to say at least PJ, Brett Kavanaugh, Mark Judge, Leland Ingram at the time, and yourself were present, and possibly others?
And one other boy. So there were 4 boys. I just don't know the name of the other boy. So.
Have you been contacted by anybody saying, hey, I was at that party too?
No, I haven't talked with anyone from that party.
Okay. Now, you've been detailed about what happened once you got up the stairs, and so I don't need to go through that again. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just realized that I said something that was inaccurate. I said I hadn't spoken with anyone from the party since that. I've spoken with Leland.
Okay. Thank you for correcting that. I appreciate that. You've gone into detail about what happened once you went up the stairs, so I don't feel like it's necessary to go over those things again.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you told us everything that you do remember about it?
I believe so, but if there are other questions, I can attempt to answer them.
Okay. You said that the music was solely coming from that room. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it was turned up once the 3 of you were inside that room. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, do you recall it being turned down?
I don't remember if it was turned down once I was leaving the house. I don't remember.
Okay.
Likely, since I could hear them walking down the stairs very clearly from the bathroom.
Okay. And the bathroom door was closed when you heard this. Is that correct?
I could hear them very clearly hitting the walls, going down the stairwell.
In fact, in your letter, you said that they went down the stairs and they were talking with other people in the house.
Correct.
Were you able to hear that conversation?
I was not able to hear that conversation, but I was aware that they were downstairs and that I would have to walk past them to get out of the house.
Okay. Now, let me make sure we're on the same page. Were you not able to hear the conversation or not able to understand the conversation?
I couldn't hear the conversation. I was upstairs.
Okay. How do you know there was a conversation?
I'm just assuming since it was a social gathering, people were talking. I don't know.
Okay. In your letter,
I heard them talking as they went down the stairwell. They were laughing and.
Okay. In your letter, you wrote, both loudly stumbled down the stairwell, at which point other persons at the house were talking with them. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, I had to walk past everyone to leave the house. So.
Okay. Your letter.
I'm not understanding. I'm sorry.
Okay. Your next sentence, let me try to clarify this. After you said other persons at the house were talking with them, the letter goes on with the very next sentence. I exited the bathroom, ran outside of the house, and went home.
Correct.
Okay. You said that you do not remember how you got home. Is that correct?
I do not remember.
Okay.
Other than I did not drive home.
Okay. I'm going to show you, if somebody could provide to you a map of the various people's houses at the time, and if you could verify that this is where you were living at the time.
Where I was living at the time?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a copy of these documents?
If you want one, we can get you one.
Yes, before the questions begin, so we can follow the testimony.
Okay. My staff said that we should not provide the copy.
No, we will provide the
Oh.
We will provide the copy.
Well, speak plainly with me, please.
Oh, sure. I'd
No,
like to
not
see what
you.
she's looking at.
Yeah. You have another 30 seconds now because I was rudely interrupted.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Senator Harris, we do have a blown-up copy of this for the members to view, if that's helpful.
Okay, I'm going to put check marks next to homes that I can confirm are the correct locations, and then an X or a question mark when I don't know where these people live.
I'm only asking you to confirm if that map accurately shows where you were living at the
Where
time.
I lived at the time. So I can't see the street name, but I'm happy to refer to the address or the neighborhood.
Okay, could you tell us that?
Yes, it's River Falls.
Okay.
It's near the, what is the place called? The Naval Research Center on Clara Barton Parkway.
Okay, was that a house or an apartment?
It was at my parents' home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Durbin.
Mr. Chairman, I ask consent to enter into the record letters of support for Dr. Ford from her classmates at Holton Arms School, 1,200 alumni of the school, 195 of your colleagues, students, and mentors, 1,400 women and men who attended D.C. schools, and 50 members of the Yale Law School faculty who are calling for a full FBI investigation. I ask consent to enter these into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Dr. Ford, as difficult as this experience must be, I want you to know that your courage in coming forward has given countless Americans the strength to face their own life-shattering past and to begin to heal their wounds. By example, you have brought many families into an honest and sometimes painful dialogue that should have occurred a long time ago. I'm sorry for what this has done to you and your family. No one should face harassment, death threats, and disparaging comments by cheap-shot politicians simply for telling the truth. But you and your family should know that for every scurrilous charge and every pathetic tweet, there have been thousands of Americans, women and men, who believe you, support you, and thank you for your courage. Watching your experience, it's no wonder that many sexual assault survivors hide their past and spend their lives suffering in pain silence. You had absolutely nothing to gain by bringing these facts to the Senate Judiciary Committee. The fact that you are testifying here today, terrified though you may be, the fact that you have called for an FBI investigation of this incident, the fact that you are prepared to name both Judge Kavanaugh and eyewitness Mark Judge stands in sharp contrast to the obstruction we've seen on the other side. The FBI should have investigated your charges as they did in the Anita Hill hearing, but they did not. Mark Judge should be subpoenaed from his Bethany Beach hideaway and required to testify under oath, but he has not. Judge Kavanaugh, if he truly believes there's no evidence, no witnesses that can prove your case, should be joining us in demanding a thorough FBI investigation, but he has not. Today, you come before this committee and before this nation alone. I know you're joined by counsel and family. The prosecutor on the Republican side will continue to ask questions to test your memory and veracity. After spending decades trying to forget that awful night, it's no wonder your recollection is less than perfect. A polished liar can create a seamless story, but a trauma survivor cannot be expected to remember every painful detail. That's what Senator Leahy has mentioned earlier. One question is critical. In Judge Kavanaugh's opening testimony, which we will hear after you leave, this is what he says. I never had any sexual or physical encounter of any kind with Dr. Ford. I am not questioning that Dr. Ford may have been sexually assaulted by some person in some place at some time. Last night, the Republican staff of this committee released to the media a timeline that shows that they've interviewed 2 people who claimed they were the ones who actually assaulted you. I'm asking you to address this new defense of mistaken identity directly. Dr. Ford, with what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%.
100%. In the letter which you sent to Senator Feinstein, you wrote, I have not knowingly seen Kavanaugh since the assault. I did see Mark Judge once at the Potomac Village Safeway, where he was extremely uncomfortable in seeing me. Would you please describe that encounter at the Safeway with Mark Judge and what led you to believe he was uncomfortable?
Yes, I was going to the Potomac Village Safeway. This is the one on the corner of Falls and River Road. And I was with my mother, and I was a teenager, so I wanted her to go in one door and me go in the other. So I chose the wrong door because the door I chose was the one where Mark Judge was, looked like he was working there and arranging the shopping carts. And I said hello to him. And his face was white and very uncomfortable saying hello back. And we had previously been friendly at the times that we saw each other over the previous 2 years, albeit not very many times. We had always been friendly with one another. I wouldn't characterize him as not friendly. He was just nervous and not really wanting to speak with me. And he looked a little bit ill.
How long did this occur after the incident?
I would estimate 6 to 8 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before we take a break, I can't let what Senator Durbin said. By the way, he's my friend. We work on a lot of legislation together. But you talked about the obstruction from the other side. I cannot let it go by what you've heard me say so many times, that between July 30th and September 13th, there were 45 days this committee could have been investigating this situation, and her privacy would have been protected. So something happened here in between on your side that the whole country, well, not the whole country should have known about it. No, not know about it. We should have investigated it. But we'll take a break now for 15 minutes.
There will be a break for 15 minutes, as you heard there from Chairman Grassley. The proceedings started at 10 o'clock Eastern Time this morning. They started with Chairman Grassley saying the following. He wanted Dr. Ford to be safe, comfortable, and to offer her testimony with dignity, and he wanted a show of civility all round. Senator Feinstein, the ranking member of the committee, followed that up by saying, and she brought up in detail other unproven and uncorroborated accusations against Judge Kavanaugh. It then went to Ms. Mitchell, who is the professional prosecutor employed by the Republicans to ask questions of Dr. Ford, and she began her questioning and was interrupted after 5 minutes because her initial 5 minutes was up. They then went back, Mr. Feinstein was questioning about, was it a case of mistaken identity? And Dr. Ford said, no, absolutely not. We've now got a 15-minute break. With me this morning, Judge Napolitano, Dan Henniger, the Wall Street Journal, and of course, Ash and Liz. To you first, Judge. Does Dr. Ford come across as with credibility?
With great credibility, with serious intellect, and with appropriate emotion. And at this point, she's 100%. No one's laid a glove on her, and she's absolutely believable, in my opinion.
She did have an opening statement. It was somewhat lengthy.
Yes.
She appeared, in my opinion, to be close to tears and frail.
I agree with that. I thought that was rational to see that, given what she was talking about. I mean, she went through in vivid and graphic detail what she says happened. She's absolutely certain that the person who did this to her was Brett Kavanaugh. Her memory of events before and after is fuzzy, but there doesn't seem to be any deficiency in the stated aspect of her memory about the event itself.
Dan Henninger, your opinion so far of the process and how it's coming across?
Well, I think the process is coming across as extraordinarily fractured. I mean, it's just unprecedented for a prosecutor's questioning to be interrupted every 5 minutes for political testimony by Democratic senators. Then we return to the line of questioning, which is going to be very difficult to follow. I have to say, Stuart, I think at the end of the day, which could be 6 hours from now, we're going to end up in the same place where we started. Where we started was she said, he said. Judge Kavanaugh will testify this afternoon, and I think at the end of it, it's going to be people are going to have to decide whether she's credible or he's credible. We're not going to learn anything substantive.
I think the way it's being handled is awkward at the very least. The Wall Street Journal describes it, maybe the judge can comment on this. It's a hearing, is a hybrid of parliamentary and a legal proceeding.
If I may, Stuart, I fully agree. I want to make a comment about the prosecutor. She's A+. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's gaining the confidence of the witness. This is not a cross-examination. This is, let me help you get your story out.
Yes.
But to do it in 5-minute segments, which is not the fault of the Democrats or the Republicans, it's the chairman's decision, and this is the way this committee operates, is really weird and bizarre and disruptive.
Senator Chuck Grassley continues to hammer home the point that we would not be here if this was not handled it was handled incorrectly. In other words, her privacy, Dr. Ford's privacy, has been violated. There's been a breach of trust. Her story got leaked. There was Republicans are trying to do a confidential investigation for weeks on end starting in July. They wanted it to be bipartisan. Senator Chuck Grassley said the Democrats did not step up to have it be bipartisan, and it's breaking Senate rules to have leaked this confidential information to the press, and that affects Dr. Ford. That's how we got here
and
today.
Chairman Grassley's come down hard on Senator Feinstein for that. Dan.
I want to go back to the idea that it was leaked. The process that Ms. Ford described herself was she sent the letter to her congresswoman, to Congresswoman Eshoo, but she didn't want it made public. And then she said, quote, out of a sense of duty, she reached out confidentially to the Washington Post. How do you reach out confidentially to the Washington Post? At that point, the reporters obviously leaked the story, and then reporters show up in her classroom and in her house.
I got it.
I mean, it was a very strange process, and for her to think that she was going to be able to suppress information she's handing to members of Congress and the press just doesn't compute.
Fair point.
Remember what Ben Franklin once said: 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. I mean, this is so incendiary. You can't trust anybody with it. I agree with Danny's criticism, but I don't think it impairs her credibility with respect to the specific allegations against Judge Kavanaugh.
What's interesting is Senator Feinstein, who was pushed hard on that by Chuck Grassley, did not address it at all. Did not address it. Just talked about how difficult it is for women who are victims or alleged victims of sexual assaults, how hard it is for them to come forward. She never, ever directly answered, why did you sit on this letter for so long? Why did you choose the moment you did to suddenly release this in the process of the nomination for Brett Kavanaugh?
Judge, maybe you can answer this one for me. Why is it that when someone is perhaps in the process of ruining the career and the reputation of a man nominated to the Supreme Court, why is it that someone who is in many ways undermining the integrity of the court and the nominee, why can't that person be questioned vigorously? Why do we have to step back and with absolute maximum caution have her interviewed by another woman?
I think it's because of the times in which we live. And we were talking earlier about Arlen Specter's cross-examination, and it was a true cross-examination. In fact, it was a destructive cross-examination of Anita Hill. And he used as his roadmap for that cross-examination the interview she gave to the FBI, because she told the FBI a different version of events about Clarence Thomas than she told the Senate publicly. I think he could get away with that. A skilled cross-examiner, a white male cross-examiner, cross-examining a black female victim could get away with that and be lauded for it in 1991. I don't think that the Republicans believe that that could happen today, and that even a successful cross-examination by any one of the 11 white male Republicans on Dr. Ford would cause blowback to the political career of whoever did it.
So politics prevents the sharp-edged questioning of Dr. Ford.
Yes, and I thought we'd get sharper questioning from Ms. Mitchell, but maybe we will. Yeah. She's still in the earliest stages, and this, you got to stop after every 5 minutes, is so unorthodox, so bizarre, so disruptive. I don't know how she could get on a roll at all.
Agreed. Thank you, Stuart. And then the question is, why didn't the FBI interview Dr. Ford if the FBI, did, as you pointed out, Judge, interviewed Anita Hill? So would that have helped the process, having the FBI sit down with Dr. Ford to take her statements?
President George H.W. Bush, personally, when the Anita Hill allegations were made, stopped the clock, sent the FBI out. They didn't interview just Judge Thomas and Professor Hill. They interviewed 22 people. It took 2 weeks. They gave a report an inch thick of those interviews to Joe Biden, the then chair of the Judiciary Committee, and to the president, and the hearings resumed. What we're seeing today went on for 3 days in the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas. It was
and make no mistake, we know how the FBI interviews. They would have talked to everybody in the Columbia Country Club, everyone in her high school, everyone in that neighborhood. That's what the FBI does. Everyone she's trying to protect or say, I didn't want to drag him into it, they would have been told
it's because it's emotional. It's emotional now. You have to get to the facts.
It should have been done 45 days ago.
This should be about the facts.
Yes.
It should be about the facts, done in a bipartisan, confidential way to get at the facts.
Yes, and this was covered up deliberately so the Democrats could introduce this at the very last minute and delay and therefore derail the Kavanaugh investigation. Exactly. Senator Feinstein stands accused here of dishonorable conduct.
And Ashley,
I would have thought,
and to Ashley's point,
I agree.
And didn't address
way
that.
out of bounds here?
And did not address it in her opening statement, what Senator Grassley was saying about how this was mishandled from the get-go.
Right-hand side of your screen, ladies and gentlemen, is the house of Judge Kavanaugh. We expect to see him emerge from his house and then make his way to the hearing room on Capitol Hill.
Let me say a word about Senator Feinstein. She's in a very difficult and bizarre re-election where she's running against another Democrat in California. One has to believe that that is foremost on her mind.
Well, that is not enough reason for this.
I absolutely agree with you, because when you say politics is at the root of it, you're being charitable. That's an understatement. Politics is at the root. Politics is the goal. Politics is the cause. Politics is the means of all of this.
And I have to say, I thought she reached a new low in her opening statement when this is Dr. Ford's day to present her case. She goes into the lurid details of the accusations by Ms. Ramirez and Swetnick against Judge Kavanaugh.
I think that the proceedings thus far this morning have been orderly, restrained, respectful, and accommodating of Dr. Ford. That, however, again, in my opinion, will change radically this afternoon when Judge Kavanaugh is kind of on the stand.
He has his work cut out for him, because after 2 hours of this, we have a victim who's exceptionally credible.
If this is he said, she said, at the end of the day, then judgment will be made on the credibility of Kavanaugh and Ford. Is that accurate?
Agreed. I don't think this is a search for the truth. This is just a search for who's more believable.
Who's more credible.
It's that bad.
So it's entirely, 100% political.
Absolutely,
That's
Stuart.
it.
I don't even think the other side would disagree with that.
But has that not always been true of Supreme Court hearings?
Oh, we've only had one. We've only had one other like this. In the Bork case, it was his attitude about the court. In Clarence Thomas's case, it was personal behavior.
But that goes back a generation. It's been like this for a generation.
Yes.
The thing is, both sides are talking past each other. Women have endured horrible abuse at the hands of men from time immemorial. Those are facts. Clearly, Dr. Ford suffered a trauma. We have to get at the facts. What did happen? Because a future nominee's position is at stake. What Mitchell's questioning was really interesting was, asking Dr. Ford to go through her WhatsApp text to the Washington Post, can you check it? Is it still accurate? She then said a gentleman by the name of PJ she would not call him a bystander as she initially called him in that text. He was downstairs and did not witness his assault. So Ash and I have been watching what Dr. Ford has been saying in amending what she initially said.
Yes. So she has amended
she
initially said.
Yes, in her letter, for example, that was sent to Senator Feinstein, she initially said that she wanted to address whether or not Brett Kavanaugh was the one who pushed her on the bed, and she said it was possible that Mark Judge instead pushed her in reconsidering that letter.
My question is, as Brett Kavanaugh is watching this, obviously from his home, how does he approach this? What tact does he take, Judge? Does he have to be aggressive, show some passion, absolutely deny all these allegations, show outrage, or does he have to stay cool, calm, and collected?
I don't know who's advising him, but if he comes across like a deer in the headlights like he did with Martha McCallum, he's going to lose this. If he comes across with the righteous indignation of Clarence Thomas, condemning the intrusive nature of the proceeding, insisting upon his personal probity, he's got a shot.
Okay,
but
that's what he's got to do.
Yeah, I think he must do that. But it's an uphill battle now because this woman is very credible so far.
But you do believe that he should do what Clarence Thomas did?
I believe that if he fails to do it, he's not going to be on the Supreme Court.
Was Clarence Thomas asked, did you see the proceedings involving Anita Hill? Did you watch? And he responded and said, no, I didn't watch.
Completely blew the whole committee and actually the whole country away. Wait a minute. You didn't watch this? We've all just spent a day watching it. No. What do I care what she said? The whole thing is from out of her imagination.
OK, they appear to be coming back into the hearing room. They've not yet been gavelled back to order. We've had about 14 minutes of break time. We're expecting 15 minutes, so pretty soon we're going to get back to action, so to speak. And we're still looking at the right-hand side of your screen. That's Judge Kavanaugh's home. We expect him to emerge at some point and then make his way to the hearing room, because he will be in that hearing room this afternoon. And again, I have to say that the atmosphere in that committee room will change radically.
Oh, yes.
At the moment, I do believe it's orderly, restrained, respectful, and accommodating.
It will become confrontational.
Totally so. I would imagine that the Democrats will vigorously attack Judge Kavanaugh, and that they will bring up other allegations, other unproven, uncorroborated allegations with the judge himself. Yes. That's what I'm sure that is what's going to happen.
It's how he reacts to that, Stuart. It's going to be critical. Yeah.
Before we get back to the hearing, which is about to be restarted, I should tell you that the Dow Industrials appear to be paying no attention whatsoever to what's going on.
Triple digits.
In DC.
You mentioned trading volume. It's down 14% today.
Is it really?
Yes.
Now that's interesting.
Yes.
The trading volume is down 14%.
Yeah. They're watching this.
Because everybody is watching this.
Below the average.
The whole country is watching this. Look, I don't have every other TV station on the planet on my monitors, so I cannot see whether the Weather Channel is following this or ESPN. I can actually see one ESPN channel, and they are not going with the Kavanaugh hearings. But we'll be getting back to that in just a second. Again, though, Dow Industrials now up triple digits, 125-point high. That is close to the high of the day. We're at 26,500. I believe that's because we've got solid economic growth,
durable goods
confirmed for the second quarter, sharp increase in durable goods, factory orders, that kind of thing.
Great GDP number.
Yeah. Good GDP number. Positive news on trade. We are now talking a bilateral deal with the Japanese. And there you have it. And there we have the hearings, which are about to get back underway. As I recall, we just ended one of Dr. Mitchell's questioning sessions. So I believe that when we get back there, we will be looking at questions from Democrats and other Democrats. Yes. On the right-hand side of the left-hand screen, there is Jeff Flake, Senator Jeff Flake. A lot would be
I think it was Durbin
was the last person.
Durbin was, I'm sorry. Okay, so we'll get back to Rachel Mitchell. Yeah. But that is Jeff Flake. There he sits. He's on the Judiciary Committee. If Kavanaugh is going to get voted yes and voted out of the committee, Flake has to vote yes. Am I right in that?
Absolutely.
He's got to do that.
He's the key man.
So it
there's
was
no
all
guarantee.
And the other talk is that the one to watch is also Senator Susan Collins in the overall vote, because where she goes could give cover to other Republicans to follow. In other words, Susan Collins is considered a moderate. She voted against Betsy DeVos. She voted against Scott Pruitt. And we don't know how Susan Collins is going to come down on the Kavanaugh nomination.
You say Bob Corker, Murkowski, the usual crowd.
Yeah.
And Jeff Flake.
And Jeff Flake, who sits on the Judiciary Committee.
Keep trying to say, Stuart, let us understand what's going on. If Judge Kavanaugh is defeated, it will be a wholly political judgment, because there is going to be no corroboration for Dr. Ford's testimony today. It remains, she said, he said, and he's nominated for a seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. If you can defeat someone on that basis, then what we're looking at is basically a system of frontier justice, rough justice.
Who do you
The
believe?
presumption of innocence has been lost in all of this.
And does this set the standard for future proceedings?
Right.
It certainly is. This is the Kavanaugh standard that is about to be established if he goes down.
That's a very serious thing.
It is.
I mean, the stakes are so high for the future of our politics.
Yes.
Our politics, how about a professor up for tenure at his university? How a CEO, a person who's just appointed the CEO of a company, anyone in high position, if an individual comes forward and makes this assertion, why should that not be justification for defeating them?
And the real problem, forgive me, Stuart, is that Democrats are treating an accusation as being tantamount to a conviction. They have to weigh the facts in the balance and be unemotional if they care about their advise and consent stature within the Senate to advise and consent and really give the president guidance on who the nominee should be.
So what do we do if the verdict goes against Judge Kavanaugh, who cannot prove his innocence? And there's no corroborating witness or evidence for Dr. Ford.
It should not be an article of faith that you always believe an accuser. Forgive me, I understand Dr. Ford went through something traumatic, but it has to be, the standard is the facts, corroborating facts.
There are none.
There are none.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And here we are. We're about to see. We're still waiting for Dr. Ford to come back into the hearing room. We've had an 18-minute break thus far. It was supposed to be 15 minutes. But Chairman Grassley has given great flexibility, shall we say, to Dr. Ford when she wants to take a break, how long she wants to take that break, does she want some caffeine, et cetera, et cetera.
The prosecutor's questioning was interrupted. Dr. Ford's going down. She spent the entire 18 minutes talking to that lawyer who's sitting next to her, who's obviously giving her direction on, because now he senses where this questioning is going. So it's really, as the judge said, a bizarre process.
I think I just heard a gavel, and there is Dr. Ford returning to the hearing room. Let's listen in as these proceedings continue.
Dr. Ford, let me ask you a process question here. We were going to schedule a break for 12:05. This last break came just a little bit later. I didn't call it at the right time. We're going to have a vote at 12:40. So would it be possible for you to go from now until 12:40 without a break? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now it is Senator Cornyn's time. So proceed, Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Senator. I have a blow up here to my right of the map that was shown to you. The address that's indicated on here as belonging to your family is what all the property tax records showed as being your address.
Okay.
Just to put it in perspective, I'd like to show you a further out, zoomed out picture so that we can put it in perspective. So we can show the greater Washington area. Of course, you can see the Beltway on that, the Beltway area.
Okay.
And then number 3, if we could look at that, we drew a 1-mile radius around the country club, and then we calculated from the furthest point.
Mr. Chairman, again, we don't have these documents. No, we're not. That's why she showed 3 different documents, because they depict 3 different things. So we'd like to see all 3 documents, please, so we can follow along.
Proceed, please.
Okay. Looking at the third thing here, we calculated the distance from the closest point to your house from a mile radius of the country club, and then the farthest point. You can see it's 6.2 and, of course, 8.2 miles. And you've described this as being near the country club, wherever this house was. Is that right?
I would describe it as somewhere between my house and the country club, in that vicinity that's shown in your picture.
Okay.
And the country club is about a 20-minute drive from my parents' home.
A 20-minute drive, and of course I've marked as the crow flies.
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that somebody drove you somewhere, either to the party or home from the party?
Correct.
Okay. Has anyone come forward to say to you, hey, remember, I was the one that drove you home?
No.
Okay. In your July 6th text to the Washington Post that you looked at earlier, you said that this happened in the mid-'80s. Mm-hmm. In your letter to Senator Feinstein, you said it occurred in the early '80s. Mm-hmm. In your polygraph statement, you said it was high school summer in '80s, and you actually had written in, and this is one of the corrections I referred to, early, and then you crossed that out. Later in your interview with the Washington Post, you were more specific. You believed it occurred in the summer of 1982, and you said the end of your sophomore year.
Yes.
You said the same thing, I believe, in your prepared statement. How were you able to narrow down the time frame?
I can't give the exact date, and I would like to be more helpful about the date. And if I knew when Mark Judge worked at the Potomac Safeway, then I would be able to be more helpful in that way. So I'm just using memories of when I got my driver's license. I was 15 at the time, and I did not drive home from that party or to that party. And once I did have my driver's license, I liked to drive myself. So
I assume the legal driving age was 16?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you've talked about attending therapy. In your text to the Washington Post dated 7/6, so that's the very first statement we have from you, you put in there, quote, have therapy records talking about it. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure I understand that. Did you already have your therapy records at that time?
I had looked at them online to see if they existed, yes.
Okay, so this was something that was available to you via a computer, like a patient portal?
Actually, no, I was in the office of a provider.
Okay.
She helped me go through the record to locate whether I had record of this conversation that I had remembered.
Did you show a full or partial set of those marriage therapy records to the Washington Post?
I don't remember. I remember summarizing for her what they said. So I'm not quite sure if I actually gave her the record.
Okay. So it's possible that the reporter did not see these notes.
I don't know if I can't recall whether she saw them directly or if I just told her what they said.
Okay. Have you shown them to anyone else besides your counsel?
Just the counsel.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that Brett Kavanaugh's name is not listed in those notes?
His name is not listed in those notes.
Would it also be fair to say that the therapist notes that we've been talking about say that there were 4 boys in the room?
It describes the sexual assault, and it says erroneously by 4 boys. So the therapist got the content of it wrong.
And you corrected that to the Washington Post reporter, correct?
Correct.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Blasey Ford. A lot of people are proud of you today. From a prosecutor's eye view, one of the hardest things that we have to do is to speak to somebody who's come forward with an allegation of sexual assault and let them know that we can't provide the evidence to go forward to trial. It's a hard day for the prosecutor to do that. And so, both because making a sincere and thorough investigative effort is such an important consolation to the victim in that circumstance, and because it's what you're obliged to do professionally, sincere and thorough investigation is critical to these claims in a prosecutor's world. It may be the most basic thing that we owe a victim or a witness coming forward is to make sure that we give them a full, thorough, and sincere investigation. You have met all of the standards of what I might call preliminary credibility with your initial statement. You have vivid, specific, and detailed recollections, something prosecutors look for. Your recollections are consistent with known facts. You made prior consistent statements, something else prosecutors and lawyers look for. You were willing to and did take a lie detector test. And you were willing to testify here. Here you are, subject to professional cross-examination by a prosecutor. So you've met any condition any prosecutor could expect to go forward, and yet there has been no sincere or thorough investigation of your claims. You specifically asked for an FBI investigation, did you not?
Yes.
And are you aware that when the FBI begins investigating, they might find corroborative evidence and they might find exculpatory evidence?
I don't know what exculpatory evidence is.
Not helpful to your recollection and version of events, helpful to the accused.
Understood, yes.
So it could go either way.
Yes.
And you were still not just willing, but insistent that the FBI should investigate your recollection and your claim.
Yes, I feel like I could be more helpful in that, if that was the case, in providing some of the details that maybe people are wanting to know about.
And as we know, they didn't. And I submit that never in the history of background investigations has an investigation not been pursued when new, credible, derogatory information was brought forward about the nominee or the candidate. I don't think this has ever happened in the history of FBI background investigations. Maybe somebody can prove me wrong, but it's wildly unusual and out of character. And in my view, it is a grave disservice to you, and I want to take this moment to apologize to you for that, and to report to anybody who might be listening that when somebody's willing to come forward, even under those circumstances, even having been not given the modicum of courtesy and support of a proper investigation, you've shown yourself particularly proud in doing that. And the responsibility for the decision to have this be, I think, the only background investigation in history to be stopped as derogatory information came forward belongs with 13 men: the President, Director Wray of the FBI, and the 11 members of the majority of this committee. As to the committee's investigation, the fact that Mr. Kavanaugh's alleged accomplice has not been subpoenaed, has not been examined and cross-examined under oath, has not been interviewed by the FBI, tells you all you need to know about how credible this performance is. The very bare minimum that a person who comes forward is owed is sincere and thorough investigation, and you've been denied that, and I will make a personal pledge to you here that however long it takes, in whatever forum I can do it, whenever it's possible, I will do whatever is in my power to make sure that your claims get a full and proper investigation, and not just this. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Since this issue's come up so many times, I'd like to comment. The New Yorker published an anonymous account of allegations September the 14th. 2 days later, Dr. Ford identified herself as the victim in a Post article detailing her allegations. I immediately directed my staff to investigate. September the 17th, Dr. Ford's counsel went on several television shows requesting that her client have an opportunity to tell her story. The same day, I scheduled a hearing for Monday, September the 24th, giving Dr. Ford a week to prepare her testimony and come to Washington, D.C. On September the 17th, committee investigative staff reached out to Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh to schedule follow-up interviews with Republican and Democrat investigators. Judge Kavanaugh accepted the opportunity to speak to the investigators under criminal penalty. Dr. Ford declined. In his interview on September the 17th, Judge Kavanaugh denied the allegations and requested a hearing as soon as possible. Democratic staff refused to participate in that interview. The next day, September the 18th, committee investigative staff contacted Mark Judge requesting an interview. Committee staff also learned the identity of 2 other alleged party goers and requested interviews. Mark Judge submitted a statement under penalty of felony, denying knowledge of the party described by Dr. Ford, and states that he never saw Brent in the manner described by Dr. Ford. And I can go on and on about that, but we got to realize that what we have done in this case, all the time you go through a background investigation by the FBI, then it comes to us, and there's always some holes in it that we have to follow up on. And besides,
Mr. Chairman,
we're responding to Dr. Ford's request to tell her story. That's why we're here.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Mitchell, go for
Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out that to support what Senator Whitehouse said, in the Anita Hill case,
Can we hear from Dr. Ford?
George Bush ordered that the investigation be opened again.
Ms. Mitchell, will you proceed for Senator Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Ford, the Washington Post reported in their September 16th article that you did show them therapist notes. Is that incorrect?
I don't remember physically showing her a note.
Okay.
Perhaps my counsel did. I don't remember physically showing her my copy of the note.
Okay.
But I just don't remember. I'm sorry. I have retrieved a physical copy of those medical records.
Okay, thank you. You also attended individual therapy. Did you show any of those notes to the reporter from the Washington Post?
Again, I don't remember if I showed her like something that I summarized or if I just spoke about it, or if she saw it in my counsel's office. I don't know for sure, but I certainly spoke with her about the 2013 record with the individual therapist.
And Brett Kavanaugh's name is not in those notes, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. In reading the Washington Post article, it mentions that this incident that we're here about contributed to anxiety and PTSD problems with which you have struggled. The word contributed, does that mean that there are other things that have happened that have also contributed to anxiety and PTSD?
I think that's a great question. I think the etiology of anxiety and PTSD is multifactorial. So that was certainly a critical risk that we would call it a risk factor in science. So that would be a predictor of the symptoms that I now have. It doesn't mean that other things that have happened in my life would make it worse or better. There are other risk factors as well.
So have there been other things then that have contributed to the anxiety and PTSD that you suffered?
Well, I think there's sort of biological predispositions that everyone in here has for particular disorders. So I can't rule out that I would have some biological predisposition to be an anxious type person.
What about environmental?
Environmentally, not that I can think of.
Okay.
Certainly nothing as striking as that event.
Okay. In your interview with the Washington Post, you said that you told your husband early in your marriage that you had been a victim of, and I quote, physical abuse. In your statement, you said that before you were married, you told him that you had experienced, quote, a sexual assault. Do these two things refer to the same incident?
Yes.
And at either point on these two times, did you use any names?
No.
Okay. May I ask, Dr. Ford, how did you get to Washington?
In an airplane.
Okay. I asked that because it's been reported by the press that you would not submit to an interview with the committee because of your fear of flying. Is that true?
Well, I was hoping that they would come to me, but then realized that was an unrealistic request.
It would have been a quicker trip for me.
Yes. So that was certainly what I was hoping, was to avoid having to get on an airplane, but I eventually was able to get up the gumption with the help of some friends and get on the plane.
When you were here in the mid-Atlantic area back in August, end of July, August, how did you get here?
Also by airplane. I come here once a year during the summer to visit my family.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not here. I go to Delaware.
Okay. In fact, you fly fairly frequently for your hobbies, and you've had to fly for your work. Is that true?
Correct, unfortunately.
You were a consulting biostatistician in Sydney, Australia. Is that right?
I've never been to Australia, but the company that I worked for is based in Australia, and they have an office in San Francisco, California.
Okay.
I don't think I'll make it to Australia.
It is long. I also saw on your CV that you list the following interests of surf travel, and you, in parentheses, put Hawaii, Costa Rica, South Pacific Islands, and French Polynesia. Have you been all to those places?
Correct.
By airplane?
Yes.
And your interests also include oceanography, Hawaiian and Tahitian culture. Did you travel by air as a part of those interests?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Easier for me to travel going that direction when it's a vacation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Dr. Ford. You know, in my old job as a prosecutor, we investigated reports like this. So it gave me a window on the types of cases that hurt women and hurt all of us. And I would always tell the women that came before us that they were going to have to tell their story before a jury box of strangers. And you've had to tell your story before the entire nation. For so many years, people swept cases like yours under the rug. They'd say what happens inside a house didn't belong in the courthouse. Well, the times have changed. So I just want to thank you for sharing your report with us. Now, I understand that you've taken a polygraph test. Dr. Ford, that found that you were being truthful when you described what happened to you. Can you tell us why you decided to take that test?
I was meeting with attorneys. I was interviewing various attorneys, and the attorneys asked if I was willing to take it, and I said absolutely. That said, it was almost as anxiety-provoking as an airplane flight.
Okay. And you've talked about your recollections and seeing Mark Judge at that Safeway. If there had been an appropriate reopening of this background check and FBI interviews, would that help you find the time period if you knew when he worked at that Safeway?
I feel like I could be much more helpful if I could be provided with that date through employment records or the IRS or something, anything that would help.
I would assume that's true. Dr. Ford, under federal law, and I don't expect you to know this, but statements made to medical professionals are considered to be more reliable. There's a federal rule of evidence about this. You told your counselor about this back in 2012, is that right?
My therapist, my individual therapist, correct.
Right. And I understand that your husband was also present when you spoke about this incident in front of a counselor, and he recalls you using Judge Kavanaugh's name. Is that right?
Yes, I just have to slow down a minute because I might have been confusing. So there were two separate incidents where it's reflected in my medical record. I talked about it more than those two times, but therapists don't typically write down content as much as they write down process. They usually are tracking your symptoms and not your story and the facts. I just happened to have it in my record twice. So the first time is in 2012 with my husband in couples therapy with the quibbling over the remodel. And then in 2013 with my individual therapist.
So if someone had actually done an investigation, your husband would have been able to say that you named his name at that time.
Correct.
Okay. I know you've been
2012.
concerned with your privacy throughout the process, and you first requested that your account be kept confidential. Can you briefly tell us why?
Yes. So as I stated before, once I was unsuccessful in getting my information to you before the candidate was chosen, my original intent was to get the information when there was still a list of other candidates available. And once that was not successful, and I saw that persons were very supportive of the nominee, I tracked it all summer and realized that when I was calculating that risk-benefit ratio, that it looked like I was going to just, suffer only for no reason.
Okay. You know, from my experience with memory, I remember distinctly things that happened to me in high school or happened to me in college, but I don't exactly remember the date. I don't exactly remember the time. I sometimes may not even remember the exact place where it occurred, but I remember the interaction. And many people are focused today on what you're not able to remember about that night. I actually think you remember a lot. I'm going to phrase it a little differently. Can you tell us what you don't forget about that night?
The stairwell, the living room, the bedroom, the bed on the right side of the room. As you walk into the room, there was a bed to the right, the bathroom in close proximity, the laughter, the uproarious laughter, and the multiple attempts to escape and the final ability to do so.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ford.
Dr. Ford, I want to correct the record, but it's not something that I'm saying that you stated wrongly, because you may not know the fact that when you said that you didn't think it was possible for us to go to California as a committee or our investigators to go to California to talk to you, we did, in fact, offer that to you, and we had the capability of doing it, and we would have done it anywhere or anytime. So,
thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, could I put the polygraph results on the record, please? The polygraph results in the record.
Without it.
Is there any objection?
Well, let us see the chart.
The polygraph? You want to all see it?
You hold just a minute, please.
I think you may have it.
Yeah, can we have the underlying charts too?
The underlying charts? I have the polygraph results that I would just like to put in the record. I'll deal with the charts after that. Could I put the polygraph tests in the record?
Mr. Chairman, we had proposed having the polygraph examiner testify, as you know. If that had happened, the full panoply of materials that he had supporting his examination would have been provided. You rejected that request, so what we did provide was the polygraph report, which is what the members of the committee currently have.
And on September 26, Mr. Chairman, this was actually sent to your chief counsel, and I just want to share it with America so that they have this report as well.
Okay, we will accept without objection what you've asked us to include, but we're also requesting and expect the other materials that I've just stated.
But, Mr. Chairman, you wouldn't allow the underlying witness who performed the polygraph test to testify, nor would you allow Mark Judge to testify. And so I would just like to point out, thank you for allowing this report in the record, but that is the reason that we don't have the underlying information for you.
You got what you wanted, and I think you'd be satisfied.
Mr. Chairman,
I am satisfied with that. Thank you.
Senator, go ahead.
When was the polygraph administered?
It was administered on August 7th, 2018, and it was the date of the report is August 10th, 2018, Mr. Chairman.
When was it provided to the committee?
Let's just see if we can't do this in a more orderly way.
Well, he was asking, and I have it right here, and you have it as well. It was September 26th.
We've accepted it.
All right.
Ms. Mitchell for Senator Cruz.
Thank you. Dr. Ford, we've talked about the day and the night that you've described in the summer of 1982, and thank you for being willing to do that. I know it's difficult. I'd like to shift gears and discuss the last several months.
Okay.
In your statement, you said that on July 6th, you had a, quote, sense of urgency to relay the information to the Senate and the President. Did you contact either the Senate or the President on or before July 6th?
No, I did not. I did not know how to do that.
Okay. Prior to July 6th, had you spoken to any member of Congress, and when I say Congress, I mean the Senate or the House of Representatives, or any congressional staff members about your allegations?
No.
Why did you contact the Washington Post then on July 6th?
So I was panicking because I knew the timeline was short for the decision, and people were giving me advice on the beach, people who don't know about the processes, but they were giving me advice, and many people told me, you need to hire a lawyer, and I didn't do that. I didn't understand why I would need a lawyer. Somebody said, call the New York Times, call the Washington Post, put in an anonymous tip, go to your congressperson. And when I weighed those options, I felt like the best option was to try to do the civic route, which is to go to my congressperson, who happens to be Anna Eshoo. So I called her office, and I also put in the anonymous tip to the Washington Post, and unfortunately, neither got back to me before the selection of the nominee.
You testified that Congresswoman Eshoo's office contacted you on July 9th. Is that right?
They contacted me the date that the nominee was announced, so that seems likely.
Had you talked about your allegations with anyone in her office before the date of July 9th?
I told the receptionist on the phone.
Okay. On July 10th, you texted the Washington Post again, which was really the third time. Is that right? Second date, third time.
Let's see.
One moment.
Correct.
And you texted, been advised to contact senators or New York Times, haven't heard back from Washington Post. Who advised you to contact senators or the New York Times?
Beach friends, coming up with ideas of how I could try to get to people, because people weren't responding to me very quickly. So very quickly they responded to that text for what unknown reason. That once I sent that encrypted text, they responded very quickly.
Did you contact the New York Times?
No.
Okay, why not?
I wasn't interested in pursuing the media route particularly, so I felt like one was enough, the Washington Post, and I was nervous about doing that. My preference was to talk with my congressperson.
Okay. The Washington Post texted back that someone would get you in touch with a reporter. Did you subsequently talk to a reporter with the Washington Post?
Yes, under the encrypted app and off the record.
Okay. Who was that reporter?
Emma Brown.
Okay. The person who ultimately wrote the story on September 16th?
Correct.
Okay. Did you talk to any member of Congress, and again, remember, Congress includes the Senate or the House of Representatives, or any congressional staff members about your allegations between July 10th and July 30th, which was the date of your letter to Senator Feinstein?
Yes, I met with Congresswoman Eshoo's staff, and I think that's July 18th, the Wednesday, and then on the Friday I met with the Congresswoman herself.
Okay. When you met with her, did you meet with her alone, or did someone come with you?
I was alone. She had a staff person.
Okay. What did you talk about with Congresswoman Eshoo and her staff on July 18th and the 20th?
I described the night of the incident and we spent time speaking about that. And I asked her what my options were in terms of going forward and how to get that information relayed forward. And also talked to her about fears of whether this was confidential information, and she discussed the constituent confidentiality principle.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to submit for the record 5 articles, including one titled Why Sexual Assault Memories Stick, and one entitled Why Didn't Kavanaugh Accuser Come Forward Earlier? Police Often Ignore Sexual Assault Allegations.
Without objection, so ordered.
Dr. Ford, I want to begin by thanking you for coming to testify in front of us today. You came forward with very serious and relevant information about a nominee for a lifetime position on our Supreme Court. You didn't have to, and I know you've done it at great personal cost. This is a public service, and I want you to know that I'm grateful to have the opportunity to hear from you directly today. I'd like to just first follow up on that line of questioning Ms. Mitchell was following, because I think a lot of people don't realize that you chose to come forward with your concerns about Judge Kavanaugh before he was nominated to the Supreme Court. Do I understand correctly that when you first reached out to Congresswoman Eshoo and to the Washington Post tip line, that was when he was on the short list, but before he was nominated to the Supreme Court? Is that correct?
Correct.
And if I understood your testimony earlier, it's that you were motivated by a sense of civic duty and frankly, a hope that some other highly qualified nominee might be picked, not out of a motivation at a late stage to have an impact on the final decision.
Correct. I felt it was very important to get the information to you, but I didn't know how to do it while there was still a short list of candidates.
Thank you, Doctor. According to Justice Department data, about 2/3 of sexual assault survivors don't report their assaults. Based on your experience, I'd be interested in hearing from you about this because you bore this alone. You bore this alone for a very long time, and it'd be helpful for us to better understand the ways that that's impacted your whole life.
Well, it's impacted me at different stages of the development of my life. So the immediate impact was probably the worst. So the first 4 years, I think I described earlier, a fairly disastrous first 2 years of undergraduate studies at University of North Carolina, where I was finally able to pull myself together. And then once coping with the immediate impacts, the short-term impacts, I experienced like longer-term impacts of anxiety and relationship challenges.
Thank you for sharing that. And yet you went on to get a PhD from USC, is that correct?
Correct.
As you predicted, there was a wide range of responses to your coming forward. Thousands of survivors have been motivated and inspired by your courage. Others have been critical. And as I've reviewed the wide range of reactions, I've been really troubled by the excuse offered by too many that this was a high school incident and boys will be boys. To me, that's just far too low a standard for the conduct of boys and men in our country. If you would, I'd appreciate your reaction to the excuse that boys will be boys.
I can only speak for how it has impacted me greatly for the last 36 years, even though I was 15 years old at the time. And I think, the younger you are when these things happen, it could possibly have worse impact than when you're when your brain is fully developed and you have better coping skills that you've developed.
Experts have written about how it's common for sexual assault survivors to remember some facts about the experience very sharply and very clearly, but not others. And that has to do with the survival mode that we go into in experiencing trauma. Is that your experience, and is that something you can help the layperson understand?
Yes, I was definitely experiencing the fight or flight mode. Is that what you're referring to? Yes, so I was definitely experiencing the surge of adrenaline and cortisol and norepinephrine, and credit that a little bit for my ability to get out of the situation, but also some other lucky events that occurred that allowed me to get out of the event.
Dr. Ford, we are grateful that you came through it and that you shared your account with us and the American people. And I think you've provided important information. I'd like to thank you for your meeting your civic duty. I wish we could have provided for you a more thorough hearing today. I think asking for the FBI to investigate this matter thoroughly was not asking too much. I think asking to have the other individual involved in your assault, Mark Judge, appear before us today was not asking too much. I'm grateful you came forward, and I'm thankful for your courage, which set an important example. Thank you, Dr. Ford.
Ms. Mitchell for Senator Sass.
Dr. Ford, we were talking about you meeting in July with Congresswoman Eshoo. Yes. Did you talk about your allegations with any Republican member of Congress or congressional staff?
I did not. Where I live, the Congresswoman is a Democrat.
Okay. Was it communicated to you by your counsel or someone else that the committee had asked to interview you and that they offered to come out to California to do so?
We're going to object, Mr. Chairman, to any call for privileged conversations between counsel and Dr. Ford.
Could you validate the fact that the offer was made without her saying a word?
Is it possible for that question to be answered without violating any consul relationships?
Can I say something to you? Do you mind if I say something to you directly?
Yeah.
I just appreciate that you did offer that. I wasn't clear on what the offer was. If you were going to come out to see me, I would have happily hosted you and had been happy to speak with you out there. I just did not. It wasn't clear to me that that was the case.
Okay. Does that take care of your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, proceed then.
Before July 30th, the date on your letter to Senator Feinstein, had you retained counsel with regard to these allegations?
No, I didn't understand why I would need lawyers, actually. So I just didn't know.
A lot of people have that feeling. Let's talk about the letter that you wrote on July 30th. You asked Senator Feinstein to maintain confidentiality, quote, until...
Wait until she retrieves it.
I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to look for it. Which
2
one?
minutes, I think it's... Yeah.
Okay.
So stop the clock, will you?
It's in there someplace. No. Here it is.
Oh, I found it.
Here it is. You
Sorry.
got it.
Okay. You asked Senator Feinstein to maintain confidentiality until we have had further opportunity to speak, and then said you were available to speak further, vacationing in the Mid-Atlantic until August 7th. Is that correct?
The last line, is that what you're, I'm now just catching up with you. Sorry, I'm a little slower. My mind is getting a little tired. So I am available to speak further should you wish to discuss. Yes, I was in Delaware until August 7th.
Okay.
And after that, I went to Hampshire and then back to California.
Did you talk with anybody about this letter before you sent it?
I talked with Anna Eshoo's office.
Okay. And why did you talk to Congresswoman Eshoo's office about that letter?
Because they were willing to hand deliver it to Senator Feinstein.
Okay. Did anyone help you write the letter?
No.
Okay. After you sent your letter, did you or anyone on your behalf speak to Senator Feinstein personally or with any Senate staffer?
Yes.
Okay.
I had a phone call with Senator Feinstein.
Okay, and when was that?
That was while I was still in Delaware, so before August 7th.
Okay. And how many times did you speak with Senator Feinstein?
Once.
Okay. What did you talk about?
She asked me some questions about the incident,
okay,
and I answered those questions.
Okay. Was that the extent of the gist of the conversation?
Yes, it was a fairly brief phone call.
Okay. Did you ever give Senator Feinstein or anyone else the permission to release that letter?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. Between the letter date, July 30th and August the 7th, did you speak with any other person about your allegations?
Could you say the dates again?
Between the letter date of July 30th and August 7th, so while you were still in Delaware, did you speak with any other person about your allegations?
I'm just trying to remember what dates that.
Stop the.
You're asking her with the exclusion of any lawyers that she might have spoken with, correct?
Correct.
Oh, correct. I think correct then. I was interviewing lawyers, but I was not speaking personally about it.
Aside from lawyers that you were seeking to possibly hire to represent you, did you speak to anybody else about it during that period of time?
No.
Okay.
I was staying with my parents at the time.
Did you talk to them about it?
Definitely not.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that you retained counsel during that time period of July 30th to August 7th?
I can't remember the exact date, but it was I was interviewing lawyers during that period of time, sitting in the car in the driveway and in the Walgreens parking lot in Rehoboth, Delaware, and trying to figure out how the whole system works of interviewing lawyers and how to pick one, et cetera. So,
you testified earlier that you had you didn't see the need for lawyers, and now you're trying to hire them. What made you change your mind?
It seemed like most of the individuals that I had told, which didn't, the total was not very high, but those persons advised me to, at this point, get a lawyer for advice about whether to push forward or to stay back.
Did that include Congresswoman Eshoo and Senator Feinstein?
No.
Okay.
I want to thank Dr. Ford for what you said about acknowledging that we had said we'd come to California. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to join in thanking you for being here today and just tell you I have found your testimony powerful and credible, and I believe you. You're a teacher, correct?
Correct.
Well, you have given America an amazing teaching moment, and you may have other moments in the classroom, but you have inspired and you have enlightened America. You have inspired and given courage to women to come forward, as they have done to every one of our offices and many other public places. You have inspired and you have enlightened men in America to listen respectfully to women survivors and men who have survived sexual attack. And that is a profound public service, regardless of what happens with this nomination. And so the teachers of America, people of America, should be really proud of what you have done. Let me tell you why I believe you. Not only because of the prior consistent statements and the polygraph tests and your request for an FBI investigation and your urging that this committee hear from other witnesses who could corroborate or dispute your story. But also, you have been very honest about what you cannot remember. And someone composing a story can make it all come together in a seamless way, but someone who is honest, I speak from my experience as a prosecutor as well, is also candid about what she or he cannot remember. The senators on the other side of the aisle have been silent. This procedure is unprecedented in a confirmation hearing. But I want to quote one of my colleagues, Senator Lindsey Graham, in a book that he wrote in 2015 when he was describing his own service and very distinguished naval service as a trial lawyer. I'm not under oath. He said, quote, of his prosecutions of rape cases, I learned how much unexpected courage from a deep and hidden place it takes for a rape victim or sexually abused child to testify against their assailant. I learned how much courage from a deep and hidden place it takes for a rape victim or sexually abused child to testify against their assailants. If we agree on nothing else today, I hope on a bipartisan basis we can agree on how much courage it has taken for you to come forward. And I think you have earned America's gratitude. Now, there's been some talk about you're requesting an FBI investigation, and you mentioned a point just a few minutes ago that you could better estimate the time that you ran into Mark Judge if you knew the time that he was working at that supermarket. That's a fact that could be uncovered by an FBI investigation that would help further elucidate your account. Would you like Mark Judge to be interviewed in connection with the background investigation and the serious, credible allegations that you've made?
That would be my preference. I'm not sure it's really up to me, but I certainly would feel like I could be more helpful to everyone if I knew the date that he worked at the Safeway so that I could give a more specific date of the assault.
Well, it's not up to you. It's up to the President of the United States. And his failure to ask for an FBI investigation, in my view, is tantamount to a cover-up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Flake, Ms. Mitchell for Senator Flake.
Thank you. We've heard this morning several times that you did take a polygraph, and that was on August the 7th. Is that right?
I believe so. It was the day I was flying from BWI to Manchester, New Hampshire.
Okay. Why did you decide to take a polygraph?
I didn't see any reason not to do it.
Were you advised to do that?
Again, you're seeming to call for communications between counsel and client. I don't think you mean to do that. If you do, she shouldn't have to answer that.
Counsel, could you let her answer the extent to which she doesn't violate the relationship between you and Dr. Ford?
Say what you understood.
Based on the advice of the counsel, I was happy to undergo the polygraph test, although I found it extremely stressful, much longer than I anticipated. I told my whole life story, I felt like, but I endured it. It was fine.
I understand they can be that way. Have you ever taken any other polygraphs in your life?
Never.
Okay. You went to see a gentleman by the name of Jeremiah Hanifin to serve as the polygrapher. Did anyone advise you on that choice?
Yes, I believe his name was Jerry.
Jerry Hanifin?
Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone advise you on that choice?
I don't understand that. Yeah, I didn't choose him myself. He was the person that came to do the polygraph test.
Okay. He actually conducted the polygraph not in his office in Virginia, but actually at the hotel next to Baltimore Washington Airport. Is that right?
Correct.
Why was that location chosen for the polygraph?
I had left my grandmother's funeral at Fort Lincoln Cemetery that day and was on tight schedule to get a plane to Manchester, New Hampshire. So he was willing to come to me, which was appreciated.
So he administered a polygraph on the day that you attended your grandmother's funeral?
Yeah, correct. Okay. Or it might have been the next day. I spent the night in the hotel, so I don't remember the exact day.
Have you ever had discussions with anyone besides your attorneys on how to take a polygraph?
Never.
And I don't just mean countermeasures, but I mean just any sort of tips or anything like that.
No, I was scared of the test itself, but was comfortable that I could tell the information and the test would reveal whatever it was going to reveal. I didn't expect it to be as long as it was going to be, so it was a little bit stressful.
Have you ever given tips or advice to somebody who was looking to take a polygraph test?
Never.
Okay. Did you pay for the polygraph yourself?
I don't think so.
Okay. Do you know who did pay for the polygraph?
Not yet, no.
Did you have the handwritten statement that you wrote out? Did anyone assist you in writing that statement?
No, but you can tell how anxious I was by the terrible handwriting. We touched on it earlier, did you know that the committee has requested not only the charts from the polygraph test, but also any audio or video recording of the polygraph test? No.
Okay. Were you audio and video recorded when you were taking that test?
Okay, so I remember being hooked up to a machine, like being placed onto my body and being asked a lot of questions and crying a lot. That's my primary memory of that test. I don't know. I know he took laborious detail into explaining what he was going to be doing, but I was just focused on kind of what I was going to say and my fear about that. I wasn't listening to every detail about whether it was audio or video recorded.
Well, you were in a hotel room, right?
Correct.
Regular hotel room with a bed and bathroom?
No. It was a conference room. So I was sitting at a chair and he was behind me.
Did you note any cameras in the room?
Well, he had a computer set up, so I guess I assumed that he was somehow taping and recording me.
Okay, so you assumed you were being video and audio recorded?
Correct.
But you don't know for sure?
I don't know for sure.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to recess now for a half hour for lunch. Thank you, Dr. Ford.
We're going to keep going to the end.
He said he had a vote.
Yeah.
So, 10 minutes after 1.
Yeah, roughly.
All right, you have been watching this ongoing saga that is gripping the nation now. Christine Ford testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. The takeaway line that really is the highlight of her testimony these many hours now, that she is 100% certain, has no doubt, that Brett Kavanaugh was her attacker. She was 15 years old. He was 17. She's trying to provide